Hello, everybody, and welcome to Media Monday on the IBM TV network. I'm here with Bill Denko, who's the author of Richer Than a Millionaire and The Millionaire Next Door. Welcome, Bill, back to the show.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. And then also we have Larry Robertson, who also is a very famous author. I've got his book back here, The Deliberate Pause, which is, I think, I like that book. And also Rebel Leadership. Yeah. Oh, Bill has your book. Guess it's getting around, you know. And, David Johnson may be joining us later on this show, who's also a Pulitzer Prize winner. But Bill, I noticed you're going to be speaking coming up. You got a speaking engagement, Bill Denko, with the our friends in Utah. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's going to be in Orlando, Florida. Let's see, September 13th. Is that a Monday? Let me look at my calendar.
Sure, what day that is?
Yeah, September 13, 14, and 15. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, it's kind of exciting, and it's been about 2 years since we've been on the road in a live event, other than a few small seminars at the university, but this is going to be big.
Right. Yeah, that's the Asset Foundation seminar.
Asset protection.
Asset protection. Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and the thing is, where do you know where in Orlando that's going to be?
I don't.
Okay, well, we'll have to go check that out.
People tell me where to go. I don't know.
I understand. I'll bring Don Pendleton in sometime. Hopefully, I can get him in to come next week to tell a little bit more about that event, because those events are really good. They were very well participated. If people have a chance to go, I look at it. When I went, it was like a 3-day law school, literally, because it's good material.
You get a CPA in there, Scott Estelle. He's
right.
He used to work for the IRS. And, so he knows the inside track, and not about tax avoidance, but how about understanding the law so that you can maximize your deductions and, get a better bottom line.
Yeah, I wish there was some way, and that's the other thing I'd like to talk to Don about, is get those courses in universities around the United States. And the reason we're starting at the university level, like I said, my opinion, that needs to be drummed down into the high school and middle school level in the U.S., because it really does promote a lot of the financial literacy and financial fitness that we just don't see here in this country, Bill. And that's the reason I like your book, The Millionaire Next Door. But I wish there would be courses like what Don Pendleton does, but then have it go to universities to start with, and then eventually migrate into the high schools and the middle schools. Because unfortunately, when it comes to financial fitness and financial literacy, our schools do a pretty poor job in teaching that, So is there any possibility that could take place?
Well, even some of the stuff that Scott Estelle does as a CPA, he lays out, okay, how do you do your record keeping so that you can withstand an audit? Well, I mean, it is so simple. You can put it on one page of paper. Nobody ever tells you how to do this, about how to have that correct documentation. And as long as you have the correct document, I mean, it's something as simple as that. I mean, you could read about it, and it's probably in some textbook someplace, but hearing it in a live seminar, like with Scott, it really drives it home and say, that's exactly what has to be done to withstand the possible audit.
Yeah. Larry, do you have anything to weigh in on? I've been talking to Bill for a long time, and I've followed his work since 1984, which is even longer.
Right.
Because when I first started my estate planning practice back in 1984, now I guess that's 37 years ago, I came across him and Tom Stanley wrote a book, Marketing the Affluent. And I was like shocked when I read it, because I found out how parsimonious, cheap millionaires were that came to my office. And I was going, am I missing something? These people don't like to spend money, and that's part of their being. In other words, like can they get deals? They clip coupons. And I watched that. I said, these guys are millionaires and they're clipping coupons and they're doing all this strange stuff to save every dollar. Do you see that in your work, or is it like these entrepreneurs, free spending entrepreneurs who eventually go broke?
Oh no. Well, I do see both sides of that, but since we want to really focus on the successful entrepreneurs, I would say not just successful entrepreneurs, but successful investors, angel investors, venture capitalists, and others. They have that same. It's really a mindset, right? It's if I'm going to make money, I need to be thinking about how I do that all the time, not just towards a certain goal in a certain time frame, but over time. How do I make that a habit in the way I think about everything? So as you accumulate wealth or assets, you don't suddenly lose that mindset if you're one of those folks who really understood that that was going to be the basis of how you build something greater and something long lasting. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's disappointing that there are some programs, believe it or not, that actually are trying to teach some of these skills and expose people to them at a very young age. The youngest I know is 6th grade, and it's kind of a middle school program, and then it evolves up through high school. And there are several of those around the country, but they're isolated, they're privately funded, and they really haven't spread a lot beyond their communities. And it's a shame, because what I found when I was teaching at Georgetown in the MBA program was I had to go backwards. I had to take those students who were in their mid-20s to mid-30s on average and teach them these things that they had never learned, teach them about what happens in the real world versus philosophically, how do you start a business, how do you create wealth, how do you create value was really more of my emphasis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing is, I found that to be also a problem. In other words, this is the reason I like Don Pendleton's work, because it's practical. You know, when I got my MBA, they taught a lot of things, but they were not practical. Okay, in other words, marketing, we're going to do market segmentation. You know, there were buzzwords like market differentiation. Okay, I know you're laughing, Bill, but this is but to me it was more
I'm
valuable.
guilty of teaching that. You know,
Yeah, but it was more valuable to me than what I learned in political science. I left political science because I was going, this is like worthless. I mean, there's no job at the end of the rainbow getting a bachelor's in political science at the University of South Florida, sorry to say. But at the end of the day, you hit the only thing I could see is to hit the unemployment lines. So I quickly moved over to get the MBA, and I go, well, at least it's somewhat valuable. But still, even when it comes to marketing, I was going, they never gave me the nuts and bolts of what to do next to market the product. Yeah. Market segmentation, market differentiation, and all this other theoretical stuff is wonderful, but there was no nuts and bolts attached to it. And this is what Don does. He actually says, okay, these are the nuts and bolts of what you actually have to do. Even something so simple as to set up a corporation. They go over a lot of corporate law over there. Now, the thing is, I actually took a lot of corporate law courses, but in law school, in the MBA school, you know, I don't know about you guys, maybe you at Georgetown, were there corporate law classes offered to the MBA students at Georgetown?
Yes, actually there were. And really? In reverse, if you were in the law school, you were offered some of these MBA courses. And, you know, so things like that are a positive sign. And yet I wouldn't say that it's infiltrated the whole design around, we're talking about an MBA. You know, it was so interesting in most of the MBA programs that I taught in, because in addition to teaching at Georgetown as an adjunct, I also would guest lecture in other programs. And it was always fascinating to me that there was this rush to point students towards, well, let's pretend you're gonna actually start a business, or let's start a business. Let's jump right to the idea, and you gotta have your idea, and you gotta be going in 2 weeks. So they would skip ahead and skip over all the fundamental practical things that you're talking about. They would skip ahead as though everything was going to go in a positive direction from that moment forward. Not a what happens if the shit hits the fan? What happens if something in between occurs where things are just flat? What happens if you can't attract the talent or the assets or the research? None of that was discussed. It was, how do we come up with this idea? How do we write a business plan? And then how do we pitch it to an audience? And frankly, while those things are important, over the long term, they're the least important things.
Okay, well then I'll bring. You brought up another question that if those are least important things, when you're starting a business, what is the most important thing?
Know why the hell you're doing it. I mean, it's really that simple. Okay. It's remarkable to me how many people start into a business and are doing it. Well, let's take the most obvious answer, because I want to make a lot of money. Anybody who has made a lot of money in any kind of venture and has sustained that ability to make money, has helped other people within that venture and outside of it, partners and such, to make money as well, doesn't have that as their primary goal, because they know that it's a product. Making money is a product of other things that you emphasize, that you do, and that you target. So knowing why the hell you're doing it is key. And when you a lot of people start businesses with enthusiasm. I mean, we talked with Michael Gerber a few weeks ago, right? And he is the Pied Piper of, you don't just start a business because you love the thing you're doing, like making pies is the thing that he emphasizes in his most famous book, The E-Myth Revisited. You don't just go into business because you want to make money. You go into it for more fundamental reasons, including a gut check of, are you prepared to handle what's coming your way? So I think that all comes back to, why are you doing it in the first place? And are you suited to that reasoning?
Yeah. Well, that goes to, it sounds to me, it goes to this fundamental called a business plan. In other words, what's your plan for this year? What's your plan for 5 years? Now, one of the boards I'm sitting on actually does have a plan for a year and a plan for 5 years, but it's just a small homeowners association. I was pretty impressed they actually are planning. That's a good idea. Then another company I'm working with right now, which I was number 75th shareholder in, I asked, well, what's your plan? And I talked to one of their attorneys yesterday. They have no plan. But it's not a small company. It's not a big company. They have 150 million in revenue. Okay. Now think about that. A company with 150 million in revenue, and there is no plan. Have you seen that before, Larry? In other words, you walk into these companies with, decent sized revenues. We don't have a plan. We're just out there being a company. Have you seen that, Larry?
What I've seen that is similar to what you're talking about is not so much that they don't have a plan, it's that the plan is irrelevant. So if you treat a business plan in particular, or a strategic planning cycle even, we're going to do this every year, every 3 years, it used to be every 5 years. If you think of it as just the exercise of creating the document at the end, but you aren't tying back to what that means to your operations day to day. You aren't thinking about how the assumptions you made when you put the plan together might be shifting over time, which right now they're shifting by orders of magnitude. Then the plan is kind of irrelevant. So those companies you're talking about, you could say they didn't have a plan because the plan that they had was something that sat on a shelf or was in a file in their inbox, and not something they really connected back to on a day-to-day basis. I think that's the biggest Achilles heel for businesses, is that the plan is really irrelevant to the day-to-day.
Yeah. Bill, how do you deal with internal politics on corporations? This is something that's always interests me, and I guess it happens in academia also as well. There's all this internal politics that exists. In other words, A doesn't like B doesn't like where C's going, and you're sitting there dealing with political issues. In a lot of cases, from what I've seen, it doesn't drive the organization forward. Right. You're spending a lot of time managing micro stuff that doesn't seem to make a difference. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, how about taking a look at today's front page of the Wall Street Journal with Scholastic Publishing? The leader of the company died a few months ago at age 84 without a succession plan. And on top of that, this privately held company, which is worth over $1 billion, the likely successor is going to be the chief strategist, a woman in the company who is not related in any way, but the company was founded by the guy who's just died, his father, in about early 1900s. And the guy who just died at age 84 was only the second leader of this $1 billion company. No succession plan. And all of a sudden, this woman, and the guy's divorced, and he has 2 kids who thought they were going to have some sort of role in the company. It's a mess right now.
Right.
You know, this is making the press in Publishers Weekly. Of course, it's now in the Wall Street Journal, and it's just a reality. But when you talk about the internal politics, the kids are wondering, well, how come we're not part of the plan? And the one who was named in the will, not only for controlling shares, this woman who's was the strategic planner in the company, she also became the inheritor of his personal fortune. So you talk about an uncomfortable situation among family members right now. This is it, and it's playing out right in front of our eyes.
Right.
But, getting back to the politics, like at a university, I mean, look, I loved it until I became chairman of my department. And
teaching was fun until you're the chairman of the department.
Yeah,
right.
Because as a chairman of the department, you report to the dean, and the dean has to report to a provost. Well, guess who is getting the pressure? The chairman, who has the unenviable task of telling his colleagues or her colleagues, this is what we need to do. And since your colleagues have tenure, and you hear from them, I need, I want, and I can't. That old herding cats problem. How do you get people who have that, tenure, which is a good thing, but their attitudes sometimes can be tricky to work with, unfortunately.
Yeah,
well,
anyway, I'm sure that
that was enough to say, look, I don't need this. I left at a time when we were going to get a new president, a new provost, and a new dean. I said, this is my perfect time to exit and just continue with the speaking circuit and consulting. And I never looked back. And it was, you know what? I never looked back. I don't want to go back.
Yeah. Well, Larry, unfortunately, looks like he gets to look forward, which is a different situation. So how do you deal with these? And I understand where Bill is coming from. These 3 needs: I need, I want, I cannot. In other words, when you go into an organization and you're working with people, this is what you're getting.
Yeah, it was interesting. I had a couple thoughts as Bill was talking, and one is, and maybe we can come back to this later, that historical model of how institutions of higher learning work. It's not only, I'll use my words, and Bill did not say this, but it's in some ways a very archaic model for how to run an organization. And so the question that's always in my head, because I still work with a lot of universities, is can that old model keep pace with the demands of this fast moving, ever changing world? And I know, we've been saying a similar thing for decades, but really the speed with which things are changing and the speed with which students going through those institutions need to be able to adapt their own skills doesn't seem to line up very well with the way the model is built right now. And not to mention the fact that, if it's a physical university, the infrastructure and the amount of spending that's done every year just to build more buildings or do more research, how do you keep filling that pipe with funds if you're not giving students and if you're not giving the world what they really need to contend right now? So that was the first thing that popped into my head. But the point you're talking about is those phrases that Bill pointed out that come from faculty. Well, they also come from a lot of middle management and senior management in for-profit organizations. They're, in many ways, I think they're very I-centric, because they're not really given a chance to invest in the we-centric. For example, we talked about planning earlier. The business plans and the strategic plans still in many organizations are really forced down. They may be fed data from below, but they're really forced down as this is the way we're going to do it, play your role. Leadership is the same way. Instead of looking across an organization to really ask everyone to leave, to participate in that process of leading the organization forward, it is still very much top down. And so the more you continue in that vein and the more people have individual pressures on themselves, the more they're going to turn to statements like, I can, I want, and I can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. But when I see some successful companies, like there's one in particular that's big in footprint in the northeastern United States, is Stewart's bread and butter shops. They're convenience stores with gas stations. And you see these articles in the paper saying there are more millionaires who have been minted from employees working there because they all have a buy-in. They all have become stockholders. And so when you have a manager of a local food store as a stockholder, it becomes pretty personal to you, saying that I know if I can make this work, I am going to succeed as well. So everybody benefits by having this, equity. Skin in the game.
Absolutely.
Don't they change their mentality rather than be an employee? They're more an employer. In other words, once you're an owner, I did notice that, obviously owning companies for 37 years. So I've been unemployed most of my career, which is
right.
kind of fascinating. Shaquille just told me, I sold my company. Now I'm unemployed. I was going, well, I've been unemployed for 37 years. But I did notice that working with employees was totally different than being an owner, especially the last company, which I don't manage anymore. I turned management over to someone else, so I don't have to do that, which is a bit of a pain. But when I did, the employees would always come in at 9 o'clock, no earlier. Leave at 5 o'clock. I mean, almost could. I didn't need a watch. Okay, at 5 o'clock, they're all out the door. And I was going like, wow, this is amazing. And frankly, Bill, here's another thing amazing. They really didn't want to be owners of the company. They had no real interest in doing anything except working and being told what to do. And I'm sitting there now. I had already owned 2 other companies before I did this one. Fortunately, this one has lasted for 20 years, which was it's still around. I get dividends and it keeps growing. It's almost like I can't stop it. It keeps growing. Okay, the thing is, but what about this attitude that I first experienced, because that these people, they didn't want to be owners. They just wanted to be employees and get a steady paycheck. Do you see that at all? I'll ask Larry, do you see that at all, that hey, I'm not interested in owning the company. I don't want the responsibilities. I just want a paycheck.
I do, and almost without exception, that there's a portion of the employee base that feels that way. Sometimes it's a very small portion. Sometimes it's quite significant. I think what is interesting is to kind of connect the two. Bill used the phrase equity or skin in the game, and what is so interesting about not just my own interactions with companies and advising them, but the research on what motivates and what drives employees to contribute while they're there, to want to stay, to continue with the company and so on, is the equity or skin in the game that doesn't necessarily have a dollar sign attached to it. So it's a sense of involvement. You've given me the responsibility. Our success is my success. What I do matters. I gain a certain sense of mastery over whatever my job is. That turns out to be the more significant driver to a wider percentage of employees in any company. So I'm not saying that money doesn't matter. I'm not saying that actual equity doesn't drive some people. It most definitely does. But that value in the middle seems to take the two ends, right? The people who want the financial equity and those who just want to show up and do the job, right, and connect them in an important way. And it's typically undervalued. In fact, companies that try to motivate their employees tend to throw money and benefits at them. But if you look at what really drives people to stay, that isn't always it.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right. Do you see that also, Bill? I mean, the thing is, when you were at the university, was it money the main reason people were at the university being professors, or
Mm,
was there another reason that they would be at
no,
the university?
yeah, you know what? No, they weren't in it for the money, really. It's the love of knowledge, really.
Mhm.
It's that's the reason I went in, and the and isn't that what a doctor of philosophy? The whole idea is, being a lover of knowledge, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
It's now, of course, there are some entrepreneurial faculty who exploit their degrees in a way with patents in their name, and what the heck? I don't begrudge that, but what I'm saying is most faculty are pretty honest shooters about why they're doing the research at the. I'd like to tell my students today we're going to talk about something very important, and there's dead silence. And I said, we're going to talk about my research.
And there was more dead silence.
Yeah. Well, but the point is, the faculty, well, including myself, we have this captive audience who will listen to us, and and it's good research,
Mhm.
but it's whether specifically that's what the students want to hear is not really what drives the faculty. I remember one of my colleagues saying, "Well, how does a student know what they want to hear?" It's like having the well, I said, like it's like having a customer telling the company what to make. Well, what a great idea that would be. But some faculty take the attitude of, look, I know what's best for them, and this is the way we're going to do it. Um, and I think there's some merit in that, actually,
Mhm.
passing down the wisdom. But
Right.
you also made the other point about the archaic Larry, the archaic institution and how universities came about. Where okay, we get this building, the professor stands in front of the class, all the students come to us. Well, that's got to change. I mean, that's been dead for 100 years, I think, but it's still you can't kill. Well, no, you can't kill it. It's been dying for 100 years. Um, but again, in today's Wall Street Journal on the C-suite third section, there's an article about Pearson Publishing out of London
Yes.
saying, yeah, we always talk about the textbook, but he says the electronic learning is here to stay, and that's the direction they're going to push some of the resources of Pearson. This remote learning idea, and I think Pearson is right on target with that assessment.
Mhm.
Just one quick anecdote here. One of my undergraduate students at the university, she was an exchange student from the University of Würzburg, Germany. And then she went back to Würzburg, and then lo and behold, she got involved with a PhD program at that university. But she called me up from Würzburg, to my home in New York, saying, look, professor, my professors here in Würzburg, they don't really want to talk to me or deal with me on a one-on-one basis. I need somebody I can actually talk to and bounce ideas off. And that's one of the things that I think American universities have that most other universities do not have around the world, where you have access to the faculty on a personal basis. And that can make all the difference with a motivated student, I think.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Bill. All of the things that you just said link to something that I'm just fascinated watching, and it's this rapid emergence of what many I'll call them brick and mortar universities are calling their global campus.
Mhm.
So they're going into a different market for their services. They're following the lead of those that were purely or almost exclusively digital, the Strayers of the world, and so on, and targeting people who came out of high school and went straight into some kind of job, but now they want to go back and earn a degree, or people who are coming out of the military and they either want to earn a degree where they didn't, or they want to add to it in some way. And those are the primary customers of a lot of these global campuses. So that, like here in the Northern Virginia area, the University of Maryland has such a campus. I know that the University of Arizona just purchased Ashford University, which was a completely online university. So it's fascinating as they go that direction, because they're absolutely embracing that digital sphere. They're also seeing this entire new market that wants higher education. They just don't want it in the same form or at the same price.
Mhm.
And these universities that are adding that are, in theory, at least on paper, they're building this hybrid of, we recognize that the old archaic way isn't going to go away, and by the way, has some benefits to it, but we're going to go after this other market simultaneously. I think it's still yet to be seen how that plays out, but it is the fastest growing market for higher education, is this online and this hybrid.
Yeah, I agree. And Google has recently come out saying, "Look, we're going to create a series of certificate programs, and they can hire their own faculty to do this, and it'll be done digitally. If you want to learn R programming, C programming, whatever you want to learn, we can help you do this in 2 months
Mhm.
in our boot camps."
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think
Google
it's,
is going to be formidable.
oh my gosh, can you imagine that? I mean, there are lots of those programs out there right now, and I see, even people that are in my network and that I interact with, loading up those certificates behind their name, putting them on their LinkedIn, promoting them as, look, this is what makes me distinct. So I think there's really something there.
Yeah, it must have been 40 years ago at my university. I was talking to the head of the continuing education program, not credit bearing at all, but he just does a series of certificate programs. And I asked him, I said, how in the world can you justify just giving a certificate when really the bread and butter at our university is credit bearing courses? He goes, look, this is going to be the way of the future. And you know what? He was absolutely right 40 years ago. People want a nugget of knowledge a skill to help them advance and be better at their job.
Well, also they get a brand that goes with it. In other words, the thing is, like, one thing I found that Purdue did, which I thought was pretty interesting, they acquired Kaplan Education, and Kaplan had a big footprint in online education, which is part of the reason for Purdue's acquisition. What they did when they took Kaplan, they changed the brand. Now it's Purdue Global Education. So this way, because I was looking at for some other people, they said, well, what university? Well, Purdue's got a good brand, and now you could take all the courses online. So the university, at least Purdue University, creates a international footprint basically by doing Purdue Global, by reaching out internationally through online education.
Right.
I'm not sure how traditional education is going to be able to compete with that branding. In other words, being able to take a brand and basically scale it internationally, which is what they're doing with Purdue Global.
Which brings us to that current problem right now of $1.7 trillion of student debt right now, where students say, well, I have to get a 4-year degree. I have to do this. This is the way society expects me to act. Well, all of a sudden, a debt that's not going to be discharged gets your attention.
Yeah.
Or maybe it will be discharged when the Congress gets done with it. But
but it's pretty hefty debt that students get into. And I know the university I went to, at the University of Miami, I looked at the numbers, Bill, and I could not recommend somebody go there that's paying the full freight, unless, because I did go to school with a lot of people that came from extremely wealthy families, and frankly, it wouldn't make a difference. $50,000 a year, go for 4 years, it's $200,000. These people, some of them were billionaires, some of them were worth 100 million, some were 10 million. So their parents have to cough up 200 grand. So what?
Yeah, right.
It doesn't make a difference to them. Okay. So a lot of the people I went to school with, frankly, didn't make a difference. Stuart Miller, his dad owned the Leonard Corporation. Leonard Miller, they were already worth 100 million. Now Stuart's worth over $1 billion. So they spend 50 grand a year on education. Who cares? But then let's imagine you just came from a normal working family, and you go to the University of Miami and you go 200,000 in debt to get a bachelor's degree in whatever.
Well,
you're toast.
Having been on admissions committees at the university, we basically look at a 2x2 matrix. How smart, very smart, or okay. How much financial need, a lot versus none. So what kind of student do you think we want to go after first? Smart, who doesn't need financial aid.
Right.
Okay. The next is, well, no financial aid, but you're a marginal student. We'll get you in there, but daddy has money.
Mhm.
The last thing you want is a bad student who doesn't have any money.
Right. Yeah. It just doesn't seem to make any sense.
Yeah.
But now when you throw this online model, maybe next week I can see if Jeff Brown is available, the dean of the University of Illinois Business School. He's
Yeah.
on quite a bit on our shows, and he brought up two models which I found very interesting. One, at University of Illinois, they have a master's in management for $10,000 a year online. And
Wow.
let me tell you something: a master's degree, as you guys know, $10,000. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
brand, the University of Illinois.
Yeah.
I'm going like, show me where to sign up. And then the
Yeah.
MBA program, which is more or less a 2-year degree, is 22,000. Still 22,000 for an MBA. I don't know what it is in Georgetown, but I bet it's not 22,000.
Yeah.
That may be for one course. What's the other? But see, the thing is, it to me that type, and it's an online course. But those type of models make sense as opposed to, there was one I was looking at Harvard, and I don't, it was $70,000 for a certificate. Okay. I mean, at Harvard, but you get the brand, I guess, the Harvard certificate, but still at 70,000, I don't see the value of a $70,000 certificate. I don't think the professor, I'm sorry, can bring me enough value that's going to be worth 70,000.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I
well,
just don't see it.
and so then you start to think, well, who does see the value in that? And now we're coming full circle with that, what everybody said here. A lot of these universities where their tuition continues to skyrocket, I mean, it's mind-boggling how much it is, are playing to a narrower and narrower market, right? Bill, you talked about, if I can get the smart student who also doesn't have the need, that's great, because my tuition revenues are going to go up significantly. So the question is, are these universities that are disproportionately leaning to that as their strategy for how they're going to grow, versus those who are saying, wait a second, the market for students is actually expanding, and it steps in terms of their needs, in terms of tuition, and all. We're going to go for that. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think you'll still have both strategies within the market. But I would bet for the ones who are going for that wider spectrum of students and more ways to deliver an education as the big winners.
Yeah, the other problem is reading in general. In other words, and this was, I thought, brought up by David K. Johnson, that 48% of Americans don't want to read. And that I remember, I see a lot of books behind you, Larry. I have a lot of books. Bill, who writes the book, doesn't have books behind him.
Fish.
He's got his on the wall. I see him behind him. That counts.
He sold 4 million copies of that. He doesn't need his books anymore. He has your book, Rebel Leadership. But the thing is, when he made that statistic, and I was sitting there going, and I've read some that the average person, once they graduate from college, will only buy 1 book a year or 2 books a year. Okay. I'm not going to show you what my Barnes and Noble, because you're only seeing part of the library. It just goes on and on, which I don't even want to show. It's embarrassing to the point where I can't do it. But that's a pretty poor statistic. Instead, they want to learn by listening. In other words, going to shows like this, as opposed to that. So when you write the book, Rebel Leadership, I want the podcast, Rebel Leadership. Okay. Because I'm too lazy to read. Excuse me. I'm in my car a lot. I want to plug it in, plug it to my earphones, go on a Bluetooth, listen to The Millionaire Next Door. How are you seeing this shift where it used to be like a novelty, audio, books and podcasts, but now it's taken a big space. Are you seeing this shift toward that?
So first of all, I'll add to your dire statistics. It's been half a dozen years ago now that Publishers Weekly did their own research, quite robust research about people who buy books and people who read books and so on. And what they found was that 70% of people who buy books don't read them.
Yes,
so
that's what I heard.
They want to have the wall like this, but they're not really consuming what's there in the content. And part of that is just, that statistic has been there in some form at some level for a long time. But to your point, there are now so many ways that you can consume knowledge that I'll tell you, just since my most recent book just came out, there's an expectation among readers, among smart authors, and among good publishers that you're going to have all of those different forms available. At least from the publisher, you're going to have the audio, you're going to have the digital, and you're going to have the print available. And then if you're a smart author, you're going to realize that that doesn't even capture your entire potential audience. So you're going to do the podcast, you're going to do the quick 1-minute video lessons. There's such a range of things now you have to do to get that knowledge out there. It's fascinating. And it used to be you could do these or it's a choice. Now it feels like if you even want to be a player, you got to have that range available. That's been my experience, Bill. I don't know about you.
Yeah. What's yours, Bill?
Yeah. Have that range and also the energy to do it. Oh God. As you get older, I'm approaching 70, and that's one of my friends just said he's going to retire at 75. Another one I saw just recently is now 88 and said he gave up everything at age 70. Mm-hmm. He said, he was an economist, because we were talking about, I saw him at a swim meet for a couple of my granddaughters, and he's 88, economics professor. And I asked him about modern monetary theory, MMT. And, he gives me some sort of explanation. And I said, well, I understand it really means magic money tree. And he goes, that's the equivalent. So there are things have changed since he has retired, and I'm looking forward to, slowing down myself. But you're absolutely right, Larry and Nick. You got to have a lot of energy to create these programs and have multiple formats. Some of the advice that Christy Peel gave, in the Media Minefield, she just does audio, for her podcasts and can do the video. She goes, because, when people are on the treadmill or driving in their car, that's my audience that I'm going for. So, she has made a conscious effort to, just to do audio.
Yeah. And my wife has been listening to the Washington Post and the New York Times as we go for walks. And the thing is, I was going, because the Washington Post, the New York Times model is probably a dying breed. In other words, how's the New York Times, Washington Post going to expand or do anything? But then they have a brand, and frankly, they have good content. So what they're doing is they're taking their journalists and turning them into podcasters. Now, all of a sudden, I think they're breathing life into that old model, because people are subscribing to the Washington Post, the New York Times, so they can listen to their articles on a podcast. And so it seems to me that it's almost like today, and I know that David Johnson's coming out with a new book, The Big Cheat. Okay, it's coming out September 28th. Which the sad part about books, I think by the time they're published, they may be out of date. It's like they used to say in some of the law stuff, that by the time the law is published, it's kind of out of date. But if you supplement it with like a podcast or a multimedia video cast, I think it's almost, you have to do that today with books. But again, I'm not in the book industry.
Well, like Freakonomics, Dubner and the other guy who are Freakonomics, but their podcast is wonderful. Yeah. They take a vignette and they, say, oh, gee, that's kind of quirky. Maybe I should go buy the book. But it's
right. Yeah. And Malcolm Gladwell did the same thing. He publishes his book and he publishes basically a podcast on the book simultaneously. So I think when books come out or, they start marketing it, they're going to market it in a multi-level media format, or even actually do like where we're doing. You post it on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. In other words, you go after all the social media sites. And what I also found out, the social media sites are broken down into social media groups. So you can really target your audience, which you couldn't do even years ago. And this is what I'm saying, the landscape keeps changing. And I even saw that in the marketing area. We used to market a lot through emails. Emails, first of all, I did newspaper ads. Then you move over, newspaper ads became too expensive. Then you move over to emails, and then emails, you got the ISPs start knocking you down. Now the thing is, you have social media groups, which didn't exist even like 10 years ago. So I can take my marketing budget and just hit my target audience, the people that
So
are.
so you see those lessons in your program about market segmentation were really
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, they were. Okay, you're right, Bill. They were really true. Okay, the only problem was the implementation of it keeps
Yeah.
changing,
Yeah.
and the thing is, the nuts and bolts weren't there. In other words, and some of the nuts and bolts are also just cost per click, cost per ad. In other words, this is what I'm talking about, the nuts and bolts. In other words, what's the cost for acquisition of a client? I mean, that type of stuff, it was like, out the window. But you're right. The basics of market differentiation, market segmentation, all that stuff does exist. But how does it actually work in your industry? And also, it changes. See, that's the real problem. 6 months from now, it could be all different.
In getting back to the so-called archaic university model, one of the things, though, that's come up before in our programs, actually give some students some hands-on experiences. I know at the university at Albany, where I was teaching, we had the MBA field project, where for a modest fee, an organization will fund a student project that will be directed by a faculty member. And in my case, it'll be a marketing project. And we've worked for organizations like Kodak and General Motors and some of the large banking organizations. And the other areas in finance would do projects with municipal finance and bond rating agencies. My point is, the students who get these hands-on experiences, it's a real resume builder, and it gives them a leg up when they say, holy smoke, a lot of things can go wrong.
Right.
And that's probably the best lesson that they learn.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you talk about Kodak, because I keep looking at buying their stock, and my problem is that I don't see the plan. In other words, we go back to business plan. What's your business plan for Kodak? I don't see any plan. With New York Times, normally I'd go, why would I buy a stock in a newspaper that newspapers aren't going anywhere? But if somebody came with a plan, well, we plan on leveraging our brand into podcasting, leveraging our brand into other things, repositioning our journalists to be podcasters, which they're doing right now. I can see light at the end of the tunnel. Problem I have with Kodak, Bill, I don't see any plan. I mean, I see a stock. It looks like a low value, a value proposition stock. But bloody, what's your plan? In other words, what you guys going to do for an encore?
Yeah, I remember. Who wrote In Search of Excellence? Waterman and Peters.
Yeah, Peters, right.
Yeah, right. Again, that's probably a book that's 30 or 40 years old, maybe even older. I don't know. But I remember reading it, and he talked about Kodak. He said one of the problems at Kodak is they have a whole bunch of MBAs sitting up in a tower doing groupthink.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. So we have this, this mediocre solution that is created where everybody has to buy in. So
yeah. Well, I mean, that also got me about working with corporate America. Fortunately or unfortunately, I work with them. I don't work for them, which makes a difference, because then if our relationship, as they would say, doesn't go right, I just go to another corporation, work with them. And one company that we did a lot of business and still do is a $70 billion company out of Indianapolis. And we sell pension plans, okay? Real simple, corporate pension plans funded by insurance companies. All right. Now, here's the thing that we got back from one of their executives in the life division. We don't want to sell life insurance that way. We want to do it on the kitchen table with Ma and Pa Dunbar. Okay. Unfortunately, our plans don't go to the kitchen table. They go to a doctor or a business executive. But because this guy was adamant against, we weren't selling a lot of their product. I'm just dead serious. This happened with National Pension Partners, one of the companies I own. And then, what happened was, you love this, only in America, this guy got involved in a sex scandal. In other words, when he was going on corporate trips, he was literally hiring, what do they call it, when you hire workers that come to your room. I don't know what
Escorts.
they are. There we go. Thank you. I need a subject matter expert. Thank you, Larry. I need a subject matter expert. Thank you, Larry. Okay, so the thing is, they're hiring escorts. Okay, so corporate got a hold and they fired him. Okay, so now he's gone. They brought a new guy, and he goes, well, I like corporate plans. I don't see anything wrong with them. Now we're number one in the company. And I was going like, unbelievable. But what got me, I guess, for an $80 billion company shooting themselves in the foot with an executive. How can that happen in 2019? Because I said those guys were removed a couple of years ago. And then I want to look at Kodak. I'm going, how can corporate America, who should have the ability to hire the best and the brightest, how come they end up with mediocrity? It boggles my mind, coming from an entrepreneurship, Larry, which you should appreciate, that the companies I start with nothing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're multi-million-dollar companies. Do you know how hard that is? Because you're going, you have no brand, you have no clients, you have no cash flow, you have nothing. It's called bootstrapping. I've done several of them. Okay. And you bootstrap it to a multi-million-dollar company. That's very difficult. I'm very envious of a company that already has millions of dollars and they screw it up.
Yeah.
Talk to me. How can let an entrepreneur into Kodak, baby? They'll turn that sucker around in New York minute. But that's not who they're hiring. They're hiring MBAs that tell me what to do.
So what's interesting, Nick, is that I can't tell you the number of entrepreneurial companies I worked with who did exactly what you're describing, bootstrapped through impossibility,
sure,
really breakthrough ideas. We're going to cut against the grain because we see this opportunity here. They had a plan. They built this thing up and then fell into exactly the mindset you're talking about at these larger organizations where there's no forethought. There's single-mindedness in one particular individual that influences the entire organization. It's as though they forgot that entrepreneurial mindset that had them curious, had them looking at the opportunities, the risks, the threats, and so on an ongoing basis, because they made it, right? They got to that point where they said, well, I want to make $1 million. I want to make $100 million. And once they hit there, not only did they individually stop thinking in that same way, they had never imbued it in a culture.
Right.
And so they didn't have the rest of the organization doing that with them. Yeah, it happens all the time.
And they say the reason Amazon's so successful, Jeff Bezos still runs it like a startup. In other words, he's still running out of his basement. He's not running it as a multi-trillion-dollar company, which it is. And the other thing about Amazon, they have a profit center that they kind of keep quiet. It's Amazon Web Services, AWS. They make more money off of AWS than they do all the other stuff that you see. They make more off of cloud computing, and they tend to keep that pretty quiet. But he runs every division like they were a startup, and so that's what I'm saying about Kodak, Bill. If they have a brand, they have cash flow. I think, I'm not sure anymore.
I think from their chemical division,
right? Okay. The thing is, if you get a strong leader, strong entrepreneur in, they should be able to make that sucker rock. Because they have such an advantage to any person who does bootstrapping, because you're starting, like I say, you're starting with nothing. These guys are starting already on second base, moving to first base. And this is what I see all the time. The other thing I see on entrepreneurs, Larry, okay, and this was just our experiment with CEOs versus entrepreneur. When I set up meetings with CEOs, they always show up. It's like 100%, and if they don't, they tell you. When I set up meetings with entrepreneurs, they blow you off. Some show up, some of them don't. Okay, and I'm going like, whoa, one of the keys to success, and I don't know if this is any book, is show up to your bloody meetings. I mean, the thing is, I don't know if you experience this with entrepreneurs, but I'm going like, you got to show up. And we had that experiment, unfortunately, a couple of years ago with IBM in Las Vegas. I lined up 20 startups to show up, and who's the audience they're going to show up? This is the CS conference. Our head of IBM IoT was one of them. A guy who funds over $300 million a year was another one. The other was the founder of Napster, John Fanning. Those are the three people you're going to be seeing. Out of 21 companies that we lined up, 2 showed up. The rest of them blew us off. And that's why I said, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
And I was going like,
but I don't know if it's the same pool, but all the entrepreneurs I've known over the years who didn't show up were also the ones that thought they always knew better. And they tended to be the entrepreneurs that either flatlined or went away.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah. Well, that would be my thinking, is that they're going to be unsuccessful because they're not even showing up to the party. If you don't show up to the party, you're not going to get anything. But I've also had other experiences with the startup community in general, and this is what I've seen. But that being said, in my industry, where I work in financial services, and I don't know if they ever tell the people at the university this, but as you enter the financial services industry, your odds of surviving 1 year is 50%. Half of you will fail. And because a lot of it's based on incentive. It's incentive compensation. People are used to working on salary, not incentive compensation. If you ever saw that movie that Will Smith was in, the Success,
Happiness.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Pursuit of Happiness. He wrote a book on it too, which is a real story. He turns around and tells the guy, I didn't know, Dean Witter Reynolds, I didn't know it didn't come with a steady paycheck. And I laughed. I was going, everybody in financial services, no, there's no steady paycheck. You got to make it next week after. Okay, then here's the other odds. After 5 years, 90% will be out of the industry. 90%. It's that bleak in financial services, that difficult to actually make it. And the people that go into that, an MBA, hey, I'm going to become I'm going to financial services, don't realize that in 5 years from now, they probably won't be there. 9 out of 10. Do you see that also with startups? When I was talking to John Fanning, who owns a company called Net Capital, and he funds startups, and I said, hey, the failure rate's like 80%. He goes, no, it's 90%. It's greater. Do you see that when you're talking to these entrepreneurs, that here's the reality guy? You talk to 10 of these guys, 9 of them are going to fail. What do you think?
Yeah, but the think about the conversation. You let's say we say to them, hey, 9 out of 10 entrepreneurs fail. So what do you think about that? Aren't you concerned about that? They always think they're the one that's not going to. Always. So, you've got 9 people thinking that way. And actually you got the winner who's concerned about that and is really trying to think about, how do you take calculated risks? How do I continue to work around the things that are going to cause me to fail? But they all think they're going to succeed. And those numbers are so the unfortunate thing is we don't have great numbers on entrepreneurs. We have a lot of numbers on small business, and there's a crossover. But if you look at those small business numbers over time, those statistics are even worse.
Right. Yeah. The small business owner, the failure rate is extremely high. And the thing, like I said, I was just going into the industry that I've worked in for 37 years, and we bring in producers. But the producers we mainly work with right now are seasoned producers, which are people that have already been in the industry 5 years or more, or 10 years or more. Because the new ones, their ability to do anything over the next 5 years is really constrained or hampered. And for me to spend my time with them, I know wasting my time, because you're odds on not favored to be able to do anything at all. And that's a very unfortunate reality in this particular business. So maybe next week we'll get some people on that. We're at the hour right now, so we got to go. But I do want to thank our special guest, Larry Robertson and Bill Danko, for Media Monday. Will be next week, and next week, unfortunately, will be our last week for a month, because I'm going to Europe. I'm hanging out in Paris. Sorry about that, guys. I'm going to Paris. I'm going to Athens. I'm going to Florence, Venice. I'm going to be just messing around Europe for a month. But then we'll be resuming on September 20th when I get back. So we're just going to be doing reruns. Sorry about that. But thanks. It's reruns. But you're going to be in Orlando during part of that time, Bill. Right. So won't miss it. But next week will be our last week. We want to thank everybody for watching Media Monday, and we'll see you on next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care, Nick.